Oklahoma. They don't tell about the thousands of blacks the tribes brought with them, their slaves.
My mammy and pappy belonged to a part Cherokee named W.P. Thompson when I was born.
The woman reading is my sister, Elaine Ford Staton, but the words of those who were brought by the Cherokees over the trail. Johnson Thompson was Phyllis's brother.
That Pappy had been owned by three different masters. One was the rich Jovan, the Cherokees.
My words, I was set on a mission to find out how my family became slaves of the Indians. I learned that beginning with the administration of George Washington, it was the policy of the U.S. government to civilize the Indians by teaching them modern farming techniques.
To adopt agricultural practices that patterned
at the Cherokee Museum today are slave bills of sale, including one for 3 slaves bought in 1841, and his brother Lewis were among the biggest slave holders in the tribe. Indeed, many of my mother, Kathleen's ancestors, the Rosses,
Play
14,000 Cherokees and 1,600 slaves were herded to Oklahoma. Some groups in winter, with about a quarter of the Indians and blacks dying. Oklahomans reenacting the Civil War Battle of Honey Springs. When it actually occurred, this was the Creek Nation in Indian Territory, slave territory, in which all of the 5 civilized tribes had signed treaties supporting the the South.
With oxen and camped out all along the way.
My sister, Elaine Ford Staton, reading the words of our great-grandmother, Phyllis Pettit, a girl at the time of the war. In ex-slave interviews conducted by federal workers during the Depression, she told how her brother, Johnson Thompson, and her parents were sold from one Cherokee master to another and taken to Texas.
And Pappy done the driving of the oxen. I was set in a wagon and listened to him pop his whip and holler.
On the square of the old Cherokee capital in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, stands a monument to Cherokee Confederate war dead. But the war here was confusing. While Cherokee Chief John Ross was arrested by the Union Army and shipped to D.C., his mansion was burned to the ground by Cherokee Confederate General Stan Wadey, who just didn't like the chief. And while Creek Chief Samuel Chakotay fought for the South, Apathalea-Hola, another Creek chief, fought for the Unions, his slaves at his side. In any event, when the war was over, the tribes who'd all signed Confederate treaties were in trouble.
The United States government informed the 5 civilized tribes that all previous treaties are null and void. And the first thing to be accomplished is to sign a peace treaty.
The new treaties meant the Indians lost more land. And since this wasn't legally considered the United States, Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation had not covered Indian slaves. So the treaty said they had to be freed.
One of the things the federal government required in those treaties was that these tribes adopt the blacks as equal members of the tribe, their former slaves.
One day, old Master stayed after he ate breakfast. And when us Negroes come in to eat, he said, "After today, I ain't your master anymore. You all as free as I am. We just stand and look and don't know what to say."
The words of her brother, Johnson Thompson, read by his great-grandson, Maurice Shepard.
Pappy wanted to go back to his mother when the war was over and the slaves were freed. He made a deal with Dave Mounts, a white man who was moving into the Indian country, to drive for him.
Granny Phyllis described a harrowing trip in which they had to fight off wolves with fire from their camp, a wagon journey over land and water that lasted 5 weeks.
When we would come to a river, we would cross ferry boats. But me and brother rode on a bed in the back of the wagon, and when we were crossing a river, father would make us lie down and wouldn't let us look out. He was afraid we would fall out in the river.
Finally, they arrived back to Fort Gibson in northeastern Oklahoma, where their father's mother was working as a cook for the U.S. soldiers.
My grandma, Phyllis Harnage, was the mother of the Colored Baptist Church on 4 Mile Branch, east of Fort Gibson. She organized the church and was head of it as long as she lived.
Since the Cherokee tribe owned all the land, as new Cherokee citizens, the family merely picked a spot. After Granny Phyllis Pettit married, her first child was my grandmother, Lutetia, whose third child was my dad, Sammy. Pettits and Fords still own this land today. Our Black History Special will continue in just a moment with more about Black slaves, Red Masters.
Oh,
The ex-slaves were called freed men, and the freedmen of the Indians had reason to dance. No, they weren't rich, but since they were now citizens of the tribe, and the tribe owned all the land, there was no need to sharecrop. Just stake a claim, build a cabin, start a farm. And there was the black vote. Witness this Seminole election in which they counted one candidate's supporters on the left side of the street, the other candidates on the right. To gain control of the Cherokee capital in Tahlequah, chiefs like Lewis Downing campaigned heavily for the black vote, as did Chief Spaichi for control of the Creek capital in Okmulgee.
The Creeks appointed and elected blacks as judges, attorneys. They were private secretaries. They were members of the council. And of course, the 3 black towns in the Creek Nation had representatives in both the House of Kings and House of Warriors.
Silas Jefferson was even elected one of the Creek chiefs and was among the delegation anytime that the Creeks had business in Washington. Since there was none of the lynchings or terror of the white South, Indian Territory became a mecca for blacks, even though many never gained citizenship. At least 25 black towns sprang up, some still around, like Taft, Redbird, and Tallahassee, where on a warm day, they still bring out the kitchen table for a game of dominoes.
I'm out of here. What? How you get down? I'm out of here. Glad you did.
There were black lawmen among the Creek Nation Light Horse Police, deputy U.S. Marshals like Bass Reeves, who killed 14 outlaws without ever being wounded. And there were outlaws, killers like Cherokee Bill, part black, part Cherokee, or the Buck Rufus Gang of Creeks and Creek Freedmen. And there were the rowdies.
If they got a
Cherokee Bill.
enough whiskey in them while they shoot powder.
You ever had to run from a shoot up?
I half crawled under bed.
My great-great-uncle Willis was among those rowdies. You may recall my great-grandmother Phyllis Pettit's story of how her husband's mother was sold by his Cherokee master.
He looked down a long lane after her just as long as he could see her and cried after her.
While George Pettit turned out okay, his brother Willis spent 1877 in the National Prison for shooting up the capital of Tahlequah. 5 years later, it was more serious. In March 1882, the Cherokee Advocate reported in both English and Cherokee murder trial in Tahlequah, the capital, the Cherokee Nation versus Willis Pettit. The transcript still exists today. It seems 2 weeks earlier, Willis was having an argument with his wife, Julia, when his mother-in-law, Margaret Bird, said something, so he shot her. It all happened in the home of a sick woman that the two women were visiting. Among the numerous witnesses was one Henry Bowe, who testified that the day of the murder, Willis had tried to sell him his house and his hogs for $65. He said his wife had quit him. I said to him, that won't make you sell your place. She'll come back again. He said to me, that's played out. And he cursed and said, I'm going to kill Margaret. While Willis did not take the stand, he had a witness, Maria Shepard, support his defense that Margaret was trying to kill him. As I passed her along the road, testified Maria, she said she would have Willis put away in less time than 2 weeks. But the Cherokee transcripts say the prosecutor asked Maria, what relation are you to Pettit? Not any. Is Willis not in the habit of coming to your house often? He comes there sometimes. How come Margaret to tell you about this? She did not like Willis and did not like me. Why is it that Margaret Bird did not like Willis and you? I do not want to tell about that. I am not going to tell it. The Cherokee Advocate reported, the jury returned a verdict of murder, and Willis, that is his name, was sentenced to be hung until he was dead on the 5th of May next. At a hanging in those days, the public came to watch, and the condemned man was among those expected to make a speech to warn some young person against making the same mistake. The newspaper reported Willis went to the gallows laughing. As for his last words, he said he'd made a mistake. He meant to shoot his wife, Julia.
What?
The Oklahoma Land Rush was the beginning of the end for the 5 Indian republics. 1889, Congress had given to anybody fast enough to grab it much of the land confiscated from the tribes who'd supported the South in the Civil War. 9 years later, Congress made the Indian government irrelevant by taking title to the land they still held and sending in the Dawes Commission to split it up and allot it as private farms to the individual Indians and freedmen who were members of the tribes. At mass gatherings like this, they were interviewed to determine whether they were legitimate tribal members or squatters. In the Cherokee Nation, folks like my grandmother, Letitia Ford, had no trouble proving their legitimacy and received deeds to their land. She received 60 acres. My grandpa, John Ford, was a non-citizen, but had access to land through Letitia and their children. The Fords, John's parents, Harry and Zerilda, had migrated from Kentucky in the 1870s, but Zerilda had died, and Harry had remarried a Creek freedman woman, gaining access to land as well. But some of the blacks had no connections, had not married citizens, but had established farms on tribal lands. Now, somebody was about to receive an allotment that included their farms. In the Tallahassee community in the Creek Nation, many of them turned for help to great-grandpa Harry Ford, a Baptist minister, and, says his 85-year-old surviving son Andrew, a prominent farmer.
My dad had a big barn loaf full of hay, corn. He once had sharecroppers.
But he didn't have gas lights, and that proved tragic when he came to Washington, D.C. that day, seeking someone in authority to help his neighbors keep their land. The October 19th, 1906 Evening Star reported the story. It said he took a cab to a hotel called the Philadelphia House at 348 Pennsylvania Avenue, which is where the National Gallery of Art now is. It said he asked questions around the hotel. Quote, the visitor said he wanted to meet some Baptist ministers in this city as he thought they might assist him to transact some important business in which he was interested. Then he went to bed in a room which had a gas light. My Uncle John Ford picks up the story.
Instead of him turning it out, he blew it out, and he became asphyxiated. Then the rumors are that he was really on to something, you know, that was going to benefit blacks, and maybe it was foul play.
Somebody killed him.
Yes, now that was a rumor.
The D.C. death certificate said Harry Ford, age 70s, cause of death, asphyxia.
He had $1,000 more when he left home. When he got it back, he didn't have a dime on him nowhere. Naturally wouldn't have. In the cheapest casket they could buy, and shipped him back to Oklahoma.
As for the blacks Harry was trying to help, they lost out. But all of his and his second wife's descendants received 160 acres of Creek land. They became targets for rip-offs by land speculators. And when oil was discovered on Harry's grandson Dan's land, he was essentially kidnapped.
Dan, they run him way out towards California trying to make him sell his place and all that. They called him land grafters.
Dan was no fool. He refused. Andrew said when oil was discovered on his allotment, he had no problem with land grafters, but later both he and Dan lost their wealth.
That's when they got Dan Tucker. The banks went busted and cleaned our ass out.
The end of Indian territory meant the end of an era of 40 years of tribal citizenship for blacks, the end of centuries of self-rule for the proud tribes, the Choctaws, Chickasaws, Cherokees, Creeks, and Seminoles. The descendants of those black slaves and red masters after this.
Get started in data analytics, you don't need previous experience or a degree. The Google Data Analyzation and learning how to problem solve like an analyst would. At the end of
We now look at the descendants of those black slaves and red masters and what they're doing today. We start at what was great-grandpa Harry Ford's homestead in Creek Country. Home now of the Dean family, the owner, Herman Dean, one of about 10 black farmers still left in the area. Another was his brother-in-law, 66-year-old Sherd Parker, the former sheriff of Wagner County, Oklahoma, still living on the allotment his family received from the Creek tribe. Sherd mainly raises cattle. He says he stayed in farming while others have gotten out because of his dad.
He always told us kids, if you take care of the farm will take care of you.
We went to the old Cherokee capital of Tahlequah, where the local bank displays its name in both English and Cherokee. I wanted to hear the language spoken, so my cousin, Maurice Shepard, stopped a buddy on the street.
Hello, Phil. How are you? You all right?
His name is Walter Whitekiller, which means one of his ancestors killed a white person. There are also Cherokees named Man-Killer, Six-Killer, and Ten-Killer. We dropped by a meeting of the 5 civilized tribes and found most tribes had kicked the blacks out.
That was one of the things that the Creek people wanted to do, was to get it back to where that the Muskogee Creek Indians would have full control.
The chief says there were no major complaints, but when the Cherokees did the same thing, 92-year-old Roger Nero filed a lawsuit.
They just rejected us.
Chief Wilma Mankiller says she sympathizes that it was not her decision, but
my job now is to uphold the Constitution.
In the federal lawsuit and appeal, the Cherokees won. But among the Seminoles, the historically close relations between black and red have not changed.
We have 12 Indian bands and the 2 freedmen bands.
Lawrence Cudjoe, head of the Bruner Band, says it's because Seminoles and their slaves fought together against the U.S. Army.
Our forefathers, they died together. And the help that the freedmen's gave the Seminoles, the Indians, was so, they made a blood treaty. That they, as long as the water flows and the oak tree grows, that they would be a part of that nation. They were just that close.
Near Muskogee, we met 76-year-old Napoleon Davis, whose grandparents were slaves of the Creeks. He's a retired carpenter who's building this.
Well, I'm trying to build a shrine. They call Oklahoma Creek Treatment Shrine, dedicated to the memory of the Creek Treatment.
He hopes descendants of Indian slaves will come here to share and record much of the oral history that is so rapidly dying out.
We seem like we are people that sit down and wait for other people to write our history, and it's not good.
He says he doesn't know if he'll be healthy enough or live long enough to finish his shrine, but he says his 3 children have promised if he doesn't finish it, they will. Get your pencils ready. If you want more information about Black Slaves, Red Masters. If you would like a book list on this subject, you can write to Judy Lipner, Greenwood Press, 51 Riverside Avenue, Westport, Connecticut, 08860, or call her at 203-226-3571. We leave you today back in Oklahoma with Napoleon Davis, his shrine, and his thoughts. I'm Sam Ford.
I'm trying my best to say something that they couldn't say or didn't say, something that they might wanted to say and couldn't say.
There's one kind of favor I ask of you. There's one kind of favor I ask of you. There's one kind of favor I ask of you. See that
I was to the copper color people, man.
It's a long lane,
Black freedom.
It's a long lane, ain't got no end. It's a long lane.
Yeah, man, you know, I'm just vibing, man, doing my shit that I do, man. You know, YouTubing, bullshitting around. Man, what y'all got going for tonight, man? Y'all got shit going for tonight? Know somebody getting some ass tonight, man. It's gonna be some fucking going on tonight. Oh God. They gonna be getting their fuck on tonight, baby.
Whoa.
It's one of my favorite videos of my other brother.
White man's governments of the world, jockeying for New World Order and economic battles that are going on, the dollar, the euro. That's beautiful. The dollar, the euro, and here with the Sexgate scandal. the white man's world, we feel, is coming to a close. That would look great on the lady. Her name was Valerie.
So it wasn't. It was.
This is a female piece, isn't it, brother? Yeah, this would look beautiful on her, and a complementary male piece that would go along with this. This is the Coogee
Her
line.
name wasn't Valerie.
No, her name was Phyllis.
Phyllis.
Yeah, Phyllis. The other lady's name was Valerie. All right, you remembered her?
Yeah.
That black woman caught your eye, didn't you?
No.
Didn't
Well,
she?
not in a bad sense. She didn't catch your eye.
She didn't catch my eye?
She was distracting you. Your eyes were going like.
Is that what was happening?
Yeah.
Well, it's good that it was a black woman. My eyes wouldn't go like that if it had been a white woman.
Yeah. Well, we haven't.
Well, you can't do it with Leanne, and you can't do it with
Kate.
Kate.
No, get a shot, Leanne and
You
Kate.
can't do it with your Miss England, Miss
Yeah.
London, or whatever. You can't do it with any of them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't give them a second look.
Yeah.
That's right.
Fair enough. This is horse skin. Wow.
That's the baby.
A baby horse.
Yes.
That is not going to go down well in Britain.
Oh, really?
They
Well,
love
then you
horses.
shouldn't buy them.
Well, I'm not, I
You
don't
love
think
horses more than you do black people.
in Britain.
Yes. It
Well,
goes
not
down
making
quite
trousers.
well in Britain that you colonized all of certain sections of Africa and built the wealth of England, but you sound so sympathetic over the little pony.
I wasn't trying to make a race issue out of it. Oh, you're giving me such a hard time.
Now, how would I give white folks an easy time?
I don't know. How you
What
know?
about a belt?
Okay.
Let's see what kind of.
Are
knife-
these horses too? Have you ever seen that before? Horse trousers?
No, I haven't.
We have the jacket to go with it.
Would you
So
wear
let's make
these?
it easy on you.
No, sir, I wouldn't wear that.
Why?
I'd rather have some pants made out of the white man's skin. The white man probably killed the little pony, and you're standing here acting like you are amazed because you're interviewing me like I killed the little pony.
I wasn't trying to give you a hard time about the
So
trousers.
will you admit that white people did it?
I don't know anything about who
Well, you
made
know
them.
white, you
It's a
know
good
black.
chance that it was.
Oh, you-
comes from Italy, so
yeah,
you're right.
the Italian white man is the one who kills.
Well, don't you get
Black
upset about the
people
horses now?
And I'm upset about whatever you do.
That motherfucker, that boy. God, man, that motherfucker there, man. Yeah, be laughing so motherfucking hard, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. Yeah, man. I ain't doing shit, man. Let me get some of that Kwame Ture up in me, man. With that Kwame Ture, man, with that Fannie Mae Lou, man. It was a dope conversation they had in '73 that's still relevant to this day.
To infer from your comments that you would suggest some attachment to
Is the acquired affect the system in any way it needs to be affected in order to produce on behalf of the interests of black people? I'm not saying we should have a black agency. That's not what I was referring at all. I'm saying that every other ethnic group in our society has, by some means or other, acquired the power to move out of their depressed or oppressed situation, with the exception of black and brown. I think what I'm saying is that whatever that power has to be to move the government or move local structures, that's what we need to be about. And I think that this vested interest should be the basis of our movement.
You know, America really is an ethnic society. And I live here in New York now, though I come from Texas, and New York has always been talked about as a melting pot. It really isn't a melting pot. We have Jews, we have Italians, we have blacks, we have Puerto Ricans, a variety of other cultures that live side by side with each other, not always happy with each other. But if we're talking about change, whether it's a change of the style of the government or an absolute change in the nature of the government to a socialist society or whatever other society, I think the thing that is fundamental to it, if we as Black people are going to talk about change, one of the first things we need to do is develop some unity within ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that all Black people have to speak the same language or have the same philosophy, but we have to learn to communicate, and I think we are, in a large measure, learning to communicate with each other. And we've got to develop coalitions with others because we're a small minority. We have great power, however, if we can unite our minority with other minorities, because there are other groups of people who would wish to move in the same direction as we wish. So it doesn't make me any difference whether we're going, if I thought tomorrow we could stage the revolution and the revolution would succeed, I would give leadership to it. That is a revolution by whatever method. But at this structure in our development, I believe the kind of revolution that is going to take place is a social revolution without bloodshed. And if this is to be so, one of the first things that must be accomplished is that Black people, poor people must unite themselves and then join forces with others.
Now, Harlem has been a barometer for a number of years of perhaps Black feeling across the country in terms of mood. What do you see, what direction do you see the mood in Harlem going in?
I'm not too sure that Harlem has been. To travel to other places, I'm amazed at the amount of unity. We have unity in Harlem, unity in one thing, that we're different. Many of us are different. We have more nationalist organizations. We have all of the organizations you want to perceive of, many of them have their facets in Harlem. No, I don't think Harlem is the mood. Harlem is a very sophisticated place. Sophisticated in the sense that we all understand the need for others of us to exist. So I could not use it as the barometer of America. But if it should be the barometer of America, I think it would be good.
The power structures in the South are forcing us to have more unity. You know, there have been a class split with the Black community. That's being moved because we are finding out whether you middle, like if a principal was a principal and was moved and become assistant principal, his job, if he's Black, automatically, if he becomes assistant principal, his job automatically is to carry a toilet tissue from one school to the other one and load up the bus. So he's finding that it has to get together. And I think that the change will come because we have to, it's nothing handed to us on a silver platter, and we have to work together for a change in the South.
Congressman Stokes, did your election as the new chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus indicate a new direction? And if it did not, is there a new direction for the Congressional Black Caucus?
Well, what we had to do immediately after I assumed the chairmanship was to try and evaluate our role. We found ourselves at that time being 13 Black legislators out of a body of 435 congressmen, and having formed a Black caucus for the purpose of trying to alleviate the conditions under which poor and Black and disadvantaged people live in this country. We had to try and evaluate that role in terms of 1973 and the United States Congress, particularly in light of the present administration in Washington. As we evaluated our role, we realized that we sort of grew up overnight, and we immediately tried to be all things to all people. And for a period of 18 months, we conducted a series of conferences, a series of hearings around points of interest and concern to Black and disadvantaged people in this country. And after we had developed all of the hearings and the conferences, we realized we had a great deal of data collected, a great deal of proposed legislative solutions. And so we realized that we ought to get out of the business of conducting conferences and hearings because we had the data, we had the specifics with which to work and propose legislation which would get at some of the solutions to some of these problems. So consequently, we decided that we would try and make the emphasis of the caucus that of a legislative thrust, that is, particularly in light of our work on committees, where we can fashion amendments to legislation before it even comes to the floor that would add a Black perspective to that kind of legislation. And so it's with this kind of a emphasis or thrust that the Black Caucus attempted to change its direction.
I'd like to ask either Mr. Williams and or Mr. Williams, since the National Association of Black Social Workers is definitely interested in services for Black people, poor people, and the Urban League is definitely in the business of institutionalizing services. How do you see the recent budget proposals or the appropriations for these service programs affecting Black America, specifically during the summer months and on into the years?
The way I view it, the current Nixon administration policy is creating or will create a critical condition in the Black community. They're cutting back on key services in the area of daycare, welfare, scholarships for students to attend school. Many students would not be able to attend the open school enrollment program, and etc. But even more importantly, currently in the Black community, despite the statistics that have been projected by the Nixon administration. See, we made a survey in both unemployed at this particular time right now. Now with the current cutbacks, this is going to create, even out by some of the Black group, there's something like 200 or 300,000 Black people working in the poverty program will be affected, that are currently employed, that will be affected by the job cuts. So this is only compounding the current unemployment situation that currently exists now in the Black community. So I think that we are now past the repression state. We're in a critical point, because not only does this exist in Harlem and Watts, it exists throughout the major urban areas in the city. And I think that as Black people, we're going to have to begin to speak out against this current trend because it's having a drastic effect on the Black community.
Well, Tony, to respond to that same question, that we do regard the budget cuts as disastrous, but not only in terms of the actual dollars, but the type of philosophy that these cuts have unveiled. That we're talking, well, let's just deal for a moment with the housing programs. We have to admit that some of those programs did not work. But some of those programs did not work because there was fraud involving government agencies, involving the private sector of the country. So what happens? The programs are cut out and the poor people are penalized. In other words, that we are being victimized because someone else has victimized us.
But we still getting fucked over right now to this day, 2026.
The question of the cuts deals with the type of philosophy that says the country has done enough for poor people, so now we'll move on to something programs are no longer whom we can do without. So we deal not only with the question of the dollar amounts, but the question of the type of philosophy that's trying to, well, that is being exemplified in this type of approach to the budget. So I think that that's the main thing.
We see it, and I think again, we see a rather magnificent PR game being done by the Nixon administration, because the nation as a whole assumes that the cuts that are taking place are, one, to eliminate Black people from the rolls, from the welfare rolls, to make life easier for the taxpayers out in the hinterland. But if you really track the statistics and see exactly who is benefiting from the programs that goes down, you will find that generally, 2/3 of the people who receive benefits are white and the other 1/3 being Black. In terms of those who are receiving direct public aid or public assistance, you will find that the number increases are something like 1 out of 4. And I'm not a social worker, but just the pure and simple numbers indicate that. What has happened is that out in the Midwest, where it's becoming acceptable now to assume that discrimination is a way of life, the administration has convinced people that what we are doing is keeping your taxes down, keeping those programs. We're taking those programs out rather that have contributed to the inflation and all this other foolishness. I think what we have to do, and I think there's a tragedy that some of the so-called liberals who have participated in these discussions before are not speaking out on the issue now, but it's being left to black leadership to deal with the whole question of budget cutbacks. And I think that there's a real need to raise the level of awareness across the country, because we even got some black folks who are talking about, yeah, well, we should be phasing down these things. Phasing down got nothing to do with it. If you cut back on the social program, at the same time increase the defense budget, when we're supposed to be winding down our involvement in Southeast Asia, there's something out of balance there. And
Tony, I don't think, let me just piggyback what Bill Lucy said. We should not have a discussion. There should never be a discussion of welfare without some explanation to the public of what welfare really is. Lockheed is getting welfare. People who live in the suburbs, Penn Central is getting welfare.
We pay taxes.
Pardon me?
We pay taxes.
Exactly. We pay taxes. They're not only getting welfare, but not paying any taxes. But when they get it, it is called a subsidy. And of course, we could go along and being done by our federal government, both here in America and abroad, that are in fact welfare. But Mr. Nixon and his crew are not talking about eliminating any of that. They're talking about expanding that.
Well, let me ask this. In his explanation, as far as he's gone to date, President Nixon, when he appeared on television explaining the Watergate situation as he saw it, did you sense that he was implying a reordering, a restructuring of priorities when he discussed? Didn't he say something to the effect that he was going to be a little more sensitive?
No, you want to know what I sensed? I sensed that there was a desperate man trying to cop a plea, and then he even said a prayer for us at the end of it. No, I didn't sense that he was talking about reordering priorities. I sensed that he was trying to get through a very bad night.
Was that he never really got to the substance of what we got was a lot of rhetoric, a lot of waving of the flag, and then you're supposed to go away feeling that Watergate is just going to disappear. And I think that it was an unfair trick to play on the American public.
Well, we are.
It's one thing, I'm sorry, it's one thing, that is the only president in the history of my time, and I'm 56, that can talk an hour and never say nothing.
But we also have to ask ourselves what the real meaning of that Watergate affair is. And I think it's important, especially for those of us who are here this afternoon, to recognize that if the Republican Party will go that far to sabotage the Democratic Party, to sabotage that kind of opposition, what have we already been experiencing insofar as repression is concerned, and what will we as Black people have to face in the future? Because there are many of us who feel that not only the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party as well is committed to upholding a system of exploitation and racism. If you look at the McGovern campaign, McGovern didn't even raise the question of racism, and he was supposed to be the far left wing of the Democratic Party. So I think it's important to see this Watergate scandal as being an indication of the real threat of fascism.
And I think that's what it is an indication of the lawlessness of law officials and the abuses of state power at the highest level. You have to take it beyond the particular example, as Ms. Davis said, of Watergate, to understand what's going on at all levels in our society as far as abuses of power by the government is concerned, particularly in political areas. If they're doing this against the established opposition, what are they doing against Black people? What are they doing against political activists? What is happening with statutes that are being passed and the people who are being appointed to the courts, decisions the courts are rendering? What's happening at the street level in terms of the administration of justice? Then you get the full impact of just how lawless these people are, who are supposedly in charge of administering the law. When you look at the statutes the Congress has been passing, preventive detention, you see the no-knock, you see the stop and frisk, you see the Interstate Riot Act. You look at the Supreme Court of the United States consistently cutting back upon what we regard as traditional rights in this country, doing away with the non-unanimous jury. When you look at the street level, the level of violence, officially sanctioned violence that's going on in this country, the political implications of that. Look at what happened at Kent State,
Still valid
in
to this
Orangeburg,
day, man.
Jackson
The ice,
State,
I
Southern
heard
University,
that,
Attica, where 43
damn
people were
fool
killed.
out here in the
And
middle
you
of
look
the
at the
damn
way in which the
street.
grand jury is being used, and you look at the way in which agent provocateurs are being used. Expand on this point.
I would like to.
I'd like to say this, Tony, that really, the American people, should shoulder the responsibility for what is going on now. You see, because the Democrats are just alarmed of the bugging because it's affecting them. You see, the Democrats, when they were in power, they were bugging the black movement, and no one made any kind of outcry about that. The only thing now, the chicken has come home to roost. So now that they are being affected, they are now beginning to do the outcry. We've been crying about that for years, about the invading of our privacy, the bugging, doing the civil rights movement, that it bugged Martin Luther King. This was well known, and no one spoke out against it. So what is happening now? See, it has been a revelation, and I think that the American people now deal with it. But I think that I want to go back to another point also. It's very
Ain't nothing new up under the
important
sun, man.
who the president has around him. You see what I mean? If he have, let's say, crooks around him, then who only have their vested interest at heart and not going to commit the time and the energy that is necessary to design programs to deal with blacks, then we are never going to get the kind of response from the federal government that we need. And I think that this is very important because these fellows up there are more concerned about stashing suitcase full of money. In fact, there's $2 million and $4 million that they're stashing away now. That money can be going into the black community, helping to deal with some of the problems. And I think that until we begin to focus on these kind of situations, that we're going to be missing many of the basic points.
Stoker, you've been trying. Okay. Go ahead.
I yield to the other statement of my other brother, the business sector of our community.
Well, one of the things that I keep hearing here, and I think you have to agree, would be that the capitalistic system in America is the system that we have to deal with, and the problem with it is that we don't have any blacks operating in it. I wonder if we would have the same kind of feeling about the capitalistic system if we were the capitalists and somebody else was sitting outside. I think we would begin then. I would be against it. I think that, well, Stoker says he'd be against it, and
Somebody is exploiting me. I don't care whether he's white or black or red or yellow, as long as he's doing the exploiting.
To say that that people haven't been damaged by the free enterprise system in this country. The failure of our cities is probably a direct result of the failure of the free enterprise system to do something about it. When big business begins to move out and leave the poor people to solve the problems of poor people, then you've got a failure.
Wait a minute, you can't, I'm sorry,
All right.
but you can't talk about free enterprise because there's no such thing as free enterprise.
Okay.
Capitalism in this day and age is monopoly capitalism. It is controlled by multi-billion-dollar firms, multinational firms. You know, it's controlled by the people like Rockefeller and Hughes and DuPont. Now,
Well, if that's what Richard Nixon says, and I disagree with him, I'm not interested in small business as in that in those
There you go, Big C.
because and it's I guess I'll quit working if you're convinced that that's true. But I look at all the people around here, and we've got some organizational petitions that kind of keep us from operating together at the turf. The National Association of Real Estate Brokers, the National Association the funeral directors, the National Insurance Association, they're all black. White ones all American.
It's white.
The white ones all American. I don't know how that happened.
That's because we know our nationalism.
Well, but the point I make is when our national heads protecting our turf, I said, what the heck? We aren't protecting our turf, it's their turf. We don't have any turf. So if we don't finally come together to get a piece of the turf, then we aren't going to have any turf to protect. And I think it is possible in